Howdy, folks, and welcome to the Hunting Stories Podcast. I'm your host, Michael, and as usual, we got a good one for you today. Today, we're actually connecting with Jeff Lindsey. Jeff Lindsey is a television show host, a hunter, just an all-around great guy. I kind of discovered him recently and reached out, and he did not hesitate to jump on the podcast. I want to say again to Jeff, thank you very much for coming on the podcast and sharing your stories with us. I don't want to steal too much of his thunder, but he's got some great ones for us today. They bring up a lot of emotion and a lot of laughs. So I hope you guys enjoy. Now let's go ahead and kick this thing off and let Jeff tell you his stories. Thank you. All right, Jeff. Welcome to the Hunting Stories Podcast, brother. How are you?
I'm doing great, man. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, man. I'm super glad you were so quick to say yes. I think I messaged you on Instagram and I was like, brother, I just discovered you. I love what you're doing. And I'm wondering if you have any good hunting stories. And you immediately were like, yeah, let's do it. So thank you, man.
I try not to turn down any podcast, man. So that's kind of my homage to the hunting community. Just try to do one a week or so.
That's awesome. That's funny. What's funny is I've had some people ask me, and I get nervous about being a guest on podcasts. Being a host is easy, but being the guest and like providing the main chunk of the meat and of what's going on it scares me. I don't know why.
Yeah.
Either way,
me too. Every time I'm like, oh dang.
Yeah. Well, hopefully this podcast is a little different than what you're used to, and hopefully a little bit more fun. But let's kick this thing off, man. Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself to the listeners so they know who they are hearing some stories from today?
All right. Yeah, I'm Jeff Lindsey of the Lindsey Way. We've had the Lindsey Way Hunting Show. This is going on the 9th year, believe it or not, and filmed for about 7 or 8 years with Drury Outdoors. We was on their television series, Dream Season, and was also on their DVDs back when DVDs were a thing. And now we've been doing the Lindsey Way, and we started off on the Sportsman's Channel for 3 or 4 years and jumped over to the Outdoor Channel. Now we're, it's Outdoor Channel and YouTube, social media is, and probably as much social media as more than anything. That's really kind of what people are on their phones now. So that's kind of most of our, I guess, audience knows there. It's probably how you found us.
Yeah, that's definitely how I found you. And since finding you, I've definitely dove in off the deep end, like watching your YouTube videos and stuff like that. It's always nice to find something new.
Right.
I told you I'm from Colorado, so like when you start with like Western bid game, that seems to be all you ever find. Now I moved to Texas, and all of a sudden this whole world of kind of like the eastern part of the United States and whitetail hunting and all that stuff has started showing up, and I'm like, this is awesome. So I'm excited to hear some of your stories because I feel like my podcast is a little too West heavy.
Gotcha. Yeah. And I definitely got some Western hunting stories, but we'll probably stay East Coast or Midwest to East Coast on this one.
Perfect. Well, man, let's just jump into it. I know you said you got a couple stories in mind. Why don't you set the stage and we'll just get going. Start hearing some stories.
Hey. Absolutely. Yeah. Well, we're kind of a hunting family. That's kind of one of the reasons we really just jumped into the Lindsey Way. It was because it was like our family hunts. My son had just been born. I wanted to chronicle that. I wanted to show all that. And my sister loved to hunt. My wife loved to hunt. And with Drury Outdoors, we had a heck of a platform, but we couldn't really show all of our family and everything like that just because there's only so much time on a 23-minute episode. We had 12, 14 people on the show, and it was a bunch of killers. So there was a lot of kills on there. So the storylines, we just really kind of wanted to venture out and do our own thing where we could really get into storylines. But so, yes, I've been hunting with my dad forever. He was in the tree on my first deer ever. And so, looking back now at how things have, kind of transpired or progressed since, I shot my first deer when I was 10 back in 1990. And, my son shot his first deer when he was 5, I think it was. And my nephew just shot his first deer with a bow 2 nights ago with his grandpa, my dad, sitting in the stand with him. And it was just a solid, 8-pointer, for 3 or 4-year-old 8-point deer. And I'm like, dude, and yes, he's pumped, he's happy. But I'm like, it took me, I was probably 18, 19 years old before I killed a deer that big with my bow. That's hard to come by. And
that's awesome.
So and my son, that same night we were out, he's 9 years old, and we were trying to get him a deer with his bow. And I think we'll get it done this year. He shot several with a crossbow, he's killed almost 40 deer, between crossbow and the rifle. So and muzzleloader, but I think we can get it done with a bow this year. I say that, we got all the poundage and stuff calculated where I think he can get a few inches penetration enough to kill one. But our range is 15 yards. We had a doe the other night, 17
Yeah.
yards. I'm like, look, we got a plan. We're going to stick to it. She even gave us a pretty good shot, but I'm like, we got a plan. We're going to stick to it. But that kind of leads me into my first hunt story. So I was 10 years old. And honestly, my son is absolutely ate up with hunting. I mean, that's hunting, fishing. That's all he really thinks about and wants to do. But me,
That's
I
awesome.
had a cousin when I grew up. He was my age. And we'd go with our moms a lot on the weekends. And while my dad would go to hunting camp was a little different back then, a little rougher crowd, I guess. So he wouldn't, he'd encourage me to go, but not maybe. It wasn't maybe the most kid friendliest place when we would
Yeah.
go. So
I've
I
been to a
kind
few
of
camps
go,
like that.
yeah, I'd try to kind of go on the weekend. So I just remember him playing poker all night, stuff like that. But we went. He had a box stand kind of built in the woods back then. There was. I'm not saying there was no such thing as there was lock-ons and but most of your stand, 90% of stands you hunt out were is wood built ladder stands or wood built just boxes in the trees or platforms
Okay.
with big old spikes, railroad spikes getting up to them. So this one had railroad spikes getting up to it. I vividly remember it. And we hopped up in the stand, and I remember taking my shoes off. My feet were cold, and I remember the exact boots I was wearing. They had these red shoelaces, and technology has come so far since then, just from being cold in a stand. And I think it was October 27th. The reason I remember that was my sister's birthday, and he woke me up, and I shot this spike. So my dad's first deer was a spike. My first deer was a spike. I wanted my son's first deer to be a spike, but the spot we hunt, our county in Georgia here, it has to be four on one side
Gotcha.
to be legal. So that couldn't happen. So it was a spike, and we had the whole hunting camp there. One guy was videoing. Another guy, we just had a pile of people go out and track it. I think I ended up hitting him a little back. He didn't run that far, but we found
Yeah.
him. It was just a big experience, and hunting camp. Just kind of anytime I go into a hunt camp, whether it's like next week elk hunting, you just come in, tell everybody the stories. It just kind of takes me back to that. I don't remember, like I say, a ton about that day, but there are definitely some vivid memories I have of getting that little old spike. But I was excited, and
Yeah.
then the next year I killed a couple. Next year a couple more, and it just kept growing. And when I was 12, I shot my first deer with a bow, and it just kind of back then it was more of a weekend sport or when you had time when you weren't busy with your friends or something. But now it's really a lifestyle. It's year round for us, whether we're shed hunting or
Yeah.
managing for deer. We're always doing something on the farm. It feels like every weekend, or at least every other weekend if we're not out of town, something to improve the habitat, cameras, get ready for fall, something that, and it's always with the family involved, because my I say my kids enjoy it. My son loves it. My little 2-year-old loves it, but she's kind of not there where she can go every time yet.
Yeah.
My 6-year-old, jury's still out. She likes to she's kind of more of a hang out with mom right now, but I think they'll change. She says she wants to shoot her first deer this year. So I
That's
guess we'll
amazing, man.
see.
Yeah, that's the lineage and like the heritage that I'm hoping to develop with my family. Like I told
Yes.
you, my listeners know I'm a new hunter. I'm just winging it, trying to figure it out, and stumbling as I go. And I've come to grips with the idea that I'm never going to be the world's best hunter. That being said, my son's got a shot, right? So,
Oh yeah.
and my daughter, right?
School of hard knocks. That's the best way to learn anything, in
Yes,
my
sir.
opinion. You going out there, boots on the ground, doing it yourself, learning from your mistakes. I mean, and you kind of got a little advantage, versus me at 10 years old. I'm learning and just doing what my dad says. Well, now you're learning stuff and you can process it so much quicker being an adult. So a few years you'll be caught up
Yeah, we'll
with your
see. We'll
peers.
see.
For sure.
Either way, I'm having a ton of fun with it, man. My son, he's really gotten into his bow. He's got that that bright orange bear bow that's
Oh
$20.
yeah,
So we're flinging that at some straw these days. It literally, it was 2 days ago. He just came up. He's like, "Dad, let's go shoot bows." And I was like, "Yes,
that's
sir.
awesome.
Yes,
Yeah,
sir." So I haven't taken him hunting yet, but it is my plan. As soon as I can figure out, Texas, it's a little tricky. Everything's private. I got to figure out where I'm hunting. But as soon as I
right.
do,
Yeah,
he's
ground
he's gonna
blind, something
join
like
me in the
that.
stand. And then my daughter, she's 2, right? And I just got back from an elk hunt, so I was practicing my cow calls whenever she hears me cow call, she runs over, looks around the room, finds my bugle, and goes, that. And she just wants me to rip bugles around the house. So,
really? Yeah.
I think I'm raising them right. But
Yeah.
hopefully I can develop that kind of, I'd love to be hunting with their kids, 30 years from now, whenever it might be. So
that's the goal.
What you have, I'm jealous of just where your family's come from as far as hunting, because it's beautiful. It's amazing, and I've never experienced it. Hopefully I will.
But that's what I told my nephew the other night when he shot that buck with my dad, his grandpa, in the stand. I was like, "Look, buddy, you don't realize it now, but to be in a stand to harvest your first deer with a grandpa, your first deer with a bow, and his grandpa was with him, and when he shot with a gun as well. But you'll never forget that. As long as you live, you will never remember this night right there. And it's easy for me to tell a 12-year-old kid that, but it's hard for them to understand that now. But they will later appreciate that for sure.
Yep, absolutely.
So my wife, she hunts as well, and this kind of gets into my next story, which I've told this story a few times at some hunting banquets or sportsman's dinners, stuff like that, wild game dinners, and I'm not a good speaker, but I can tell a funny hunting story, I guess. I'm gonna try to remember all of this one. It's been a few years since I told it. But when somebody says hunting stories, when you first approached me, that I was like, well, forget the opportunity. That's the one I'm going to tell, because it just hits home so much. And my wife was there. Like I say, she doesn't get to hunt as much as she used to. It's just 3 kids, one on the way. Every year it's less and less. She has killed a lot of deer. She's killed some good deer. She loves to bow hunt. She really loves to turkey hunt. And this was a particular hunt in Kansas. I had bought a farm in Kansas. It was 320 acres, and it was our first hunting trip that me and her had ever went on. We had no kids. We hadn't been married. It wasn't long. It wasn't a couple of years max, best I can remember. And it started off a little lackluster. We missed our plane. We get to, I said, you brought my broadhead. I have a little broadhead case. It looks like a little fishing tackle box. And she said, oh, yeah, I did. Well, she grabbed the wrong little case. So we got there, didn't have any broadheads, had to go buy Cabela's. And at that time, bought some, I don't even remember, Rages or whatever we could get our hands on. And so we go out there to western Kansas, and Rios out there, which are very forgiving turkeys. I know you're probably familiar with those if you're in Texas, and some parts of Colorado's got the Rios, some of the Merriams, I guess. But
yeah, I'll say the Rios in Texas are to me pretty easy. The Merriams in Colorado, those are tough.
Tougher, yeah. Yeah, the Rios are friendly. This seems like the louder you call, the faster they run. But and she had her bow. She had her bow at the time we were shooting PSC. She'd never shot, and it was bow season, because Kansas has that like early bow season for turkeys. Mm-hmm. I think it's like one of the only states that does that besides Nebraska. And so we head out there, and the first morning I'm like, I knew I didn't have a ton of turkeys on that farm. It's a very arid climate out there in Southwest Kansas. And so, I knew I had a couple. So we set up a ground blind. We hunted out of ground blinds when we bow hunted back then. It was just the start of that. Now it's popular. Everybody just turkey hunts in a ground blind, but this was like one of my first times ever in a ground blind. I knew she was going to need the concealment, and so I put up a decoy, popped up the ground blind, just went in there blind in this wheat field right on the edge of our timber, and I think we had 2 birds gobbling. And so he gobbled, had his hens obviously going in and out all morning, moving around up and down the little creek bottom there. I say a creek, there's no water in it, but it's a creek bottom with sagebrush. It's kind of an older cattle farm. It's got fences, which the fences are going to be important later on in this story. So we're sitting there, and patience. He kept working, felt like he was getting closer. Finally, the turkey comes in, struts up there. We have the decoys at like 10 yards, maybe 15. I can't remember. Well within her comfort zone. So he's strutting up there. I even videoed it, and I don't even remember much about that video. I can't even think of it in my mind's eye now. But she ended up helping call the bird in. And so it was an exciting morning, but it didn't really get too exciting, or it got really exciting when she dropped the hammer on him. So she shoots this turkey, and like all turkeys, and this is why one of the reasons I just kind of despise bow hunting turkeys. I've killed them with bow, but I'm like, turkeys were meant, in my opinion, to be shot in the face with a shotgun, because it's such a just a just a letdown or a lackluster experience when you shoot them with a bow and they take off running or whatever. Then you got to try to find them. They don't leave no blood trail, or is it going to die? Is it not? Well,
Yeah.
nonetheless, she shoots this one. This son of a gun takes off running like a road runner, and so we'd been sitting in this blind now for, gosh, I don't know, 3 or 4 hours. I don't remember exactly, but apparently, and we're on these little stools, that just crouches you up, and
Yeah.
you just got to think of all your blood is just compacted in your midsection. Okay. And I remember after I did this, I looked this up. This is some type of, uh, something that happens to you. I don't know what the word I'm looking for here, but it's something that happens to you when you've been sitting down in a position like this forever and you jump up and try to run. It's like your legs are not capable of keeping up with your mind. So I,
Yeah.
I jump up and my legs are like half asleep or whatever. And I'm running, and right out the gate, they start giving out. And I'm like, man, what is going on? This is weird. And I keep chasing. I see the turkey. I'm right on his heels. It's like Wile E. Coyote and the Roadrunner. And so I'm
Yeah.
chasing him down through this brush, and I mean it's tumbleweed and briars and small cottonwoods and prairie grass, and then I lost all feeling in my legs, and I'm falling down. I'm just tripping, and this was like the most helpless feeling in the world. I've never felt this to this day. I've never felt like nothing like that, where you no control over my legs. It was like paralysis or something. And the turkey by this point had kind of slowed down, and I knew about where he'd ran. And like a few seconds later, whatever minute, I don't know how long it passed by. My wife catches up with me. I was like, I can't go anywhere. You got to help me up. And somehow we managed to get back on my feet. My legs are still not full. And then I was like, he went this way, and I get over there, and I'm telling this is all happening so quick, but this was a span of several minutes. And I get over there, and thank God for those fences I was talking about earlier. I was like, okay, um, get your bow. He's right there. He's caught up almost in the fence. He couldn't fly. He couldn't go past this barbed wire fence. So had that barbed wire fence not been there, that son of a gun would probably still be running. I have no idea, but I was like, okay. I was like, you got to shoot him right here. This is as close as we're going to get. It's like, I don't have my arrows. I was like, what? It
Oh
took
no.
minutes to get down. You got to go get your arrows. At this point, he's too alive. Like he wasn't going to live. I mean, he was winged. Something would have ate him, but he was not mortally, I guess, wounded here. So, and of course, we're not filming this because it's all I can do I left the camera in the blind. This was probably even before GoPros. It was all I could do to even get there. And she loves to tell this story. She laughs like crazy. She went back, got her arrows, come back. She says, I come up over there. She says, Jeff's on one side of the fence. The turkey's 5 yards away on the other, and they're both looking at me like, kill me now. This is terrible. We're both wore out, and I'm out of breath, just dying for thirst, just as bad as worst shape I've probably ever been in my life. And I remember she gets her arrow, she shoots the turkey, misses the first time. So we only had like 3 arrows, and so she's got one arrow left, and I think she hits him almost like pin cushions him enough where I can grab him. I crawl over there and grab. And I don't remember if we choked him out or what happened. But nonetheless, he died. We got him, and I was like, this is why I don't like bow hunting turkeys. We're never doing this again. This was crazy. And then once it all happened, I got my feeling back in my legs. Several minutes later, we were laughing about it, enjoying it. And now, hey, it was her first turkey ever with a bow. And gosh, I think looking back, it was her first turkey. Yeah, it was her first turkey ever, and it
That's
was with a
amazing.
bow. And of course, I said I'm not going to do that again. The next morning, we were back out there and called in another one. She actually missed it that morning. But when I think about funny hunt stories, and I probably missed some details, but dang, I'll never forget that, and I hope I never have that feeling again in my life. It's probably like the closest I ever felt to, I mean, being paralyzed. I was paralyzed.
Yeah.
I could
God,
not
that's funny.
move my
It just
leg.
made me think, Jeff, of it's a meme. I'm sure some of the listeners, maybe you've seen it, but it's like, after spending 10 minutes
Yeah,
playing
looking at
around on your
things on the
phone on the
phone. Yeah.
shitter, and then you try and get up and you fall over or something
Oh,
like
that's
that. So
every day. That's exactly what it was. But I didn't have that sensation of like a dead leg or something. That it didn't feel like that as far as the tingling or whatever. But that's exactly how it responded. My body was responding. I was like, my mind was telling me to go, and I could not do anything. And it was
man, maybe you were too caught up in the moment. Maybe that tingling sensation was there, but due to the fact that it was a bird and you're going
yeah.
after it and you're attacking, that you just didn't realize. But man, that is funny. I could just see you like crawling after an injured turkey, man. That's a
Yeah,
great
like I
story.
said, she loves to tell that. It's like she said she'd come up there, and then we're both laying on opposite sides of the fence. Both of them, just our heads are awake, but everything else is just dead. And she that it was funny times, but it was a good trip. It made a lot of memories, and
Yeah, I bet, man.
it's something that's one of those I'll never forget as long as I live. One of those type hunting stories.
I bet. I bet. It's one of those stories. I've had a couple of these on the podcast before. Where I'm like, I think I'd like to hear your wife's version over your version.
Oh yeah,
Because I guarantee she remembers a couple details a little different than you do. But
oh
that's a
yeah,
great
she tells
story
it. Yeah,
either way, Jeff.
I'm the. I try to, when I tell it, I'm the butt of the joke. But yeah, she'd probably really make me the butt of that joke. But I was, I deserved it. I don't know what happened to this day. I don't know, and I'm like, I don't like blind chairs. If you're gonna put me in a chair, give me something I can move around. And now I'm like, if I'm anticipating something like that, I'm gonna stretch and get up and try to keep the blood flowing.
Oh man, did you get a chance to like inspect the bird and see what happened with her first shot?
Yeah, I think she just winged him. I really do. I think she just winged him. It just broke that wing, and um, going back, I got a ton of buddies that shoot bows or at turkeys. Kill a ton of turkeys with the archery equipment. But me, I'm just like, gosh, I just feel like you have such a high chance to just wound them. But it makes it a lot more challenging. So at the end of the
Yep.
day, probably
Yep.
evens out.
Yeah, I've killed 3 turkeys, and I've actually used 3 different types of weapons. So my first turkey was a Miriam with a shotgun. My second one was a Rio with my bow. It was actually my first archery kill ever, and then my third one was with a 270 of all damn things.
In Texas, huh?
Yep, in Texas.
My
I
son is
actually
infatuated with that.
Yeah, I called it in. I actually had given up. I'd been hunting for 2 days, not seen a thing, and I was walking around with my bow and my rifle because I was actually there for axis deer, but it was turkey season, so why not?
Yeah.
And I hike around this whole property, long, skinny property, which is why I have the rifle because I'm like, if it steps onto the property, I really need to hit it with my bow or my rifle. I can't afford to try and stalk it because they'll just walk off the property in a matter of minutes.
Yeah.
So I've got both with me, and I walk the whole property. Nothing's happening. I'm like, all right, I got to get out of here. I'm just gonna leave, and I go back to my blind, and I'm like, whatever. Let's throw out a quick call, and yip, 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 yip. He chimes up, so I jump into my blind, and he pops up at like 35 yards or something like that. And I go full draw, and there's some brush in between me and him, and I never really fired my bow through any brush. I wasn't confident, and I was like, I don't know how I feel about this. I got him dead to rights, but I just don't know if my arrow will make that. And he didn't like my setup. He popped his head up. He was gobbling. Nothing was happening, so he go ahead and turns around. So I let down on my bow and bring out my slate call. Yip, 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 yip. And he pops up, and now he's about 50 yards. And I'm like, well, let's make something of this trip. So I just pull my rifle up and I bring it up, and it's like times 10 my scope, and I can't find this bird to save my life.
Yeah.
So I'm like, oh god, like where is this? So I wind it down to times 3 and pull it up, see the bird, and boom. And yeah, he did not live nearly as long as your wife's turkey did. He was down pretty quick.
Was it like just I've always wondered what happened when you shoot him with a rifle. Is just like a feathers pop out, or what was going on?
Yeah, I couldn't even really find the entry wound, but the exit wound was his wing. He was kind of walking away from left to right, kind of quartering away, and I hit him high, which is what I was aiming for because I wanted to try and preserve his breasts and his legs, and it just
Right.
blew his back wing off, basically. So the exit wound was pretty messy, but all the rest of the meat was perfectly fine, and he died real quick.
Awesome. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think Texas is the only state you can hunt them with a rifle. a high powered rifle. And, my son, like I said, he is infatuated with that. He wants to go to Texas one day and shoot one of the rifle, just, I guess, just so he can say he did it. But
Well,
that's his goal.
in Colorado, I think in the spring it's either a shotgun or bow, but they have a fall turkey season. It's the same time as like elk season, and you can use a rifle or basically whatever you want for the fall turkey season.
In Colorado.
Yep. Yep.
You say in Colorado you could?
Yep, in the fall turkey season,
Okay.
yeah, you can.
I've
never taken advantage of it, but I was kind of looking through the regs and like, why would I, earning points and stuff, because you can actually put in for draws and get 2 turkey points per year if you do the fall and the spring draw and don't draw. Not that you need a ton of turkey points in Colorado, but
maybe there's more states. I just didn't know. I mean, that's just not something I ever think about, is shooting a turkey with a rifle. But there's probably more states that have that opportunity or something like that.
Yeah, I'm sure.
I know you can some states with a muzzle loader, which it's just always baffled me. But
yeah, it's just get bigger and bigger rounds. So.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's good, Jeff, man. That was a great story. Thank you for sharing it. I love it when people are willing to make fun of themselves or, laugh at themselves a little bit. So thank you. But what else you got, man? Let's keep going.
Yeah, well, okay. I'll go back to one of the bigger deer I've ever killed. And the reason this story kind of takes me, I don't want to say to a dark place, but me and my dad, David, we kind of have this thing. He loves to pick out a certain buck, and Iowa's our home farm. That's where we hunt the majority of the year. That's just that's what we've done the last 20 years. Yeah. But we're originally from the South, originally from Georgia, but he likes to pick a certain deer, and he just gets a little vendetta against this deer. He just kind of gets a bone to pick with him. And that's what he will, all gas, no brakes, no other deer he doesn't think about. He just keeps hunting until he kills that deer. And he always kills it. And it's a great feeling. And I've always said, by hunting one deer, once you kill that deer, it's the greatest feeling of the world. But leading up to that point, the amount of anguish and other deer you pass and all that focus and energy, it just makes it tough. So the story I'm about to tell, it was a very tough season. This deer, his name was Big Chocolate, and I first had an encounter with him. And the reason he got this name is because my son had picked up his sheds the year before. But I first had an encounter with him. I think he was 4 years old, and he came out. Okay. I don't even remember seeing this deer all summer, because we try to get a pretty good inventory of our bucks and stuff. And he came out, and I was like, man, that's a nice deer. I thought about taking a shot with him late season with my bow. I'm like, I don't really know him, and he doesn't look over 4 or 5. Another year goes by, he gets a little bit bigger. At this point, we were starting to keep up with him now. And I think when he was 6, this is when my son found his sheds, and Cash at the time he was 4 or 5, and they were on the other side of this fence, and which was our property. It's just an old cattle fence. So I remember we were shed hunting. We got this on camera. We threw him up over the fence, and he went and got it. And he's like, this is the deer I want to kill. It's these giant 160-inch sheds. I'm like, I bet you do, buddy. And then so we called him Mr. Chocolate. But then my son he's like, it's Big Chocolate. And I'm like, oh, you know what? We're changing his name. That sounds better. So Big Chocolate it was. And man, he was a giant. I have to send you a picture of this deer, but just once he got to 7.5, and that's kind of when our deer in Iowa, this is not the same in every state. I know that for a fact. I know it's not that way in Georgia. And, it's just kind of more of an upper Midwest thing. But when he got to 7, he blew. He was like I say, a 160s that year. And then when he got to 7, he was, 180 something inch typical. And then, and he just had a huge frame. And this deer he was 180, but if you would have told me he was 200, I probably would have believed it, because that's just how big he looked in every single trail cam photo. It was just Mr. Photogenic. He looked great. He was a cool deer, and we got a ton of pictures of him. But his home range was one side of our farm to the next, and we have access to about 3,000 acres in this one chunk. And so from one side to the next, you just never knew where he was going to be. And so, and we had trail cam pictures of him in the summer. He was everywhere, but that never really crossed my mind I'm like, okay, this is the deer I want to hunt this fall. It was kind of me and my dad typically we'll take turns hunting big deer. And that year was just kind of mine, and that deer was kind of in the areas that I hunt. We have our areas. So I said, okay, I'm gonna get after Big Chocolate. Early season, nothing. My dad ended up actually seeing him. Finally, got the first eyes on him that early November in a spot that real similar to where I almost killed him a few days later. And so I'm just bouncing around on this deer, and we had cell cameras out, and I'll never remember. It was like this deer. I feel like he had a cell camera on my bedroom or my driveway, because this deer, when you talk about one step ahead of you, he was the epitome of that type of cat and mouse game.
Yeah.
And just everything I'd done, I was wrong. I was in this stand, he would be in the other one, or whatever stand I was in. It was like this for months. Our season opens October 1st, November 15th. I think November 14th, 15th or something. That's when I finally had the encounter. But like I said, I had not seen this deer not one time. He's around this big timber area. And our deer in Iowa, as great as Iowa is, we have a ton of timber, and just complete opposite of, what you're probably used to out west. So you just don't, there's no real, we do have some topo there, but it's not topo that just like truly funnels the deer like bluff country or something like that, or woodlots. It's just a lot of timber gently rolling, and those deer can go everywhere. So I never laid eyes on this deer for a month and a half, other than some trail cam pics. And we did have some daytime trail cam pics I would get, and then it would just be taunting me. I was constantly checking these cameras, and you could almost say trail cameras that year, this buck, I was not going with my gut instinct. I was almost going wherever he was before, and I couldn't get that out of my mind. And he was there. Is he going to come back by? Is he in that area? Just who knows? It's just an incredible game of cat and mouse where I was the absolute loser every single day. I mean, I could even get a small win of seeing the deer or have an encounter or something, and it was just getting my fanny kicked. And my neighbor after this, it was an emotional roller coaster, because I was hunting this deer so hard, hunting almost daylight to dark in the rut, and just draining you. And that's why I was like, man, this one deer stuff just isn't for me. My neighbor actually shot over his back. He almost killed him during this pursuit. I had no idea. I remember a couple of times there'd be people, poachers, whatever, shooting off the road, and all I could ever think of was, man, did they get Big Chocolate? And then I'd have to wait till a day or two till I got another picture of him to know he's alive. Wild dogs entering the property.
Did you have a lot of poachers on your property?
Yeah. Every now and then we do. And then we had some guys that were kind of hunting a neighboring property. And one day, and during all this, my dad calls me. He's like, I got them right here in the middle of the property. I don't know what's going on. They got to know this deer's in here. Honestly, looking back now, they probably didn't have a clue that deer was in there. They just happened to be in there because it's I don't know, good spot. But we called them. It was dealt with and all that.
Gotcha.
Nonetheless, but there was so much just drama. Every day was something. Wild dogs, like I say, rifle shots off the dirt road. This neighbor here telling me about it. It was every day. It was drama, but it was just never no good news. I mean, occasionally, he's still alive over here. This is where I'm going to go kill him. Looking back, and as they say, time heals things. But even telling this story, it's a dark time. Just thinking about how hard I hunted this deer, and I had a new cameraman that year. And the kid had a really good attitude, but man, we didn't kill nothing there for a month and a half, or we'd been hunting since September. We shot an elk, I think, and we just been getting our fannies kicked. And so finally, I'm in this big CRP field one night hunting this box stand. I had been wanting to hunt there. I finally got this northern wind where I could go over here and hunt, and me and him are there, and we'd never seen this deer before. And so he's like, oh my gosh, there he is. He's coming up the edge of the CRP. He was locked down with this doe. So when they lock down with these does in the whitetail world, they're going to be with that doe for 2 or 3 days. That's just typically how it always works by the time they can breed her. She goes through her cycle. And he comes in there.
Is the buck leading or is the doe leading? And sorry for my
She's
ignorance on whitetail.
Leading
okay.
him.
Got it.
No,
So he's
no,
outside of his
shooting him.
normal.
And
That sounds good.
right, yeah, and this is an hour before daylight. He's in a just almost a drunken stupor, in love with this doe, and he looks as big as ever. And my camera guy, I mean, he'd never seen this deer in person. I haven't seen him this year, and it was just wanting to happen so bad. And so here it is. When he first comes out, he's like at 17 yards right to my left, and we're in this redneck box blind, and he's like, I can't film him. I'm like, what? You gotta film him, man. You gotta figure it out. And he couldn't do it. Well, the deer gets out there to 24 yards or 26. I can't remember exactly. Giant body deer, still very much in killable range, top 10 territory. And so, and this next thing I'll tell you is very important because I want people to learn from this. And I actually ended up going back and watch videos on this because I didn't really know. Obviously, when you shoot out of a box blind, it's going to be a little noisier, and if your bow's not extremely fast, which I shoot a very fast setup, but nonetheless, a lot of times a deer is going to react. You always hear about that in Texas. When you shoot, that deer is going to drop. Well, you got to think of, if you're in a box blind, it's going to amplify that sound a little much, and it's going to scare them. But this deer had its head down, and his antlers were a giant rack, so they're going to weigh a lot. So when the deer is feeding with his head down or has his head down, when he goes to jump, his head acts like a pendulum. And Grant Wood's done this. It's this long, detailed study. It's on YouTube, a video, that when he throws that head up, the quicker that back end goes down. And it would just make sense. The bigger the rack, the more that back end would go down, the faster or whatever. And I was shooting a broadhead that day. And I've never been one to blame the broadhead. And this particular broadhead, I'd killed tons of animals with, and I've never had a problem. It was a little bit different variety of a little later model, I guess, that I hadn't shot a deer with. But I shot, and that deer probably drops, I don't know, 8 to 10 inches at 24 yards, that's a big jump for a Midwest whitetail. It's 250 pounds or more. And my arrow went in under the spine, and it just didn't get any penetration. And I don't know if it was because, like, a glancing blow, if like somebody's trying to run by and you're trying to swing at them, it's hard to hit them square. There's a lot of physics in here that I'm just not smart enough to figure out. But nonetheless, he was going down. My arrow was going out, so it kind of just glanced on him, and it didn't penetrate. It penetrated a little bit, but not enough at that angle to do any damage. And I'll never know how much internal damage it probably really done. But anyhow, I'm like, oh my gosh, what happened? I think I hit him too high. We give him till the next morning. He ends up running on my neighbors. We track him for several hours. Spotty blood. Actually find where he beds down in this tall CRP grass right by the flipping road. So we're already worried, oh my gosh, if somebody see him right here and they grab him, they shoot him, finish him off in the night, he's not here no more. There was no more blood, but I couldn't really see where anybody had drug a deer. So just added to the whole list of unknowns. And so at this point, I'm like, I'm ready to sell all my hunting gear. I was not happy with life. It was I can honestly say the darkest time, and I know I've said that a lot, but the darkest time in my hunting career. And I still, to this day, if a big buck gets in this area where I hunted him a lot right there for that month and a half, I don't even want to go over there and hunt, because I'm like, I need time to heal still, because when I think about over there, I think about chasing big chocolate, and there's bad memories. So I'll never forget, he disappeared off camera, as they typically do when a deer gets hit like that. My theory is they just kind of go in hiding. They got to go lick their wounds. They got to recuperate. They can't move a ton. They can't. They're going to be trying to feed hard, and once they feel like they get the wound to stop bleeding and all that. But it went. Gosh, that was 14th, 15th. I can't remember what day that was, and I think it was maybe the day before Thanksgiving or something like that. A week or 10 days went by, and then it's the mental anguish of, is this deer dead? Did they?
Yeah.
Well, I have no idea. I'm just not getting any pictures. I moved a ton of cameras on his area. and I didn't know what to think. And so I'll never remember, I'll never forget. So I went hunting in that same field on the other end of it. I think it was like the night before Thanksgiving, and we had some family in town. And me and my dad hunted together. We had no camera guys, you know, it's holidays, whatever. And we rarely do that. Me and him hunt together, you know, deer hunting in the same tree or whatever. This may happen once or twice every other year. It's just not a common occurrence. And where we'd parked, I remember coming out that night after dark, and I almost still get chills thinking about it. But it was like this ray of light. And I'm not saying it was anything spiritual or anything. I mean, I'm definitely a you know, Bible believer, but it was like a ray of light coming out of the sky, and I think it was just more of the moonlight or reflection or something. But it was shooting down on this ridge, you know, just up the hill about 300 yards. I'm like, that's it. I said, we're coming in here tomorrow. That's where he's at. He he's died up on that ridge. This is my sign. I'm like, you know, because I'm just thinking, you know, any little sign at this point I can get for
Taking what you can get. Yeah.
I'll take it. I'll take it. And so then I'll never remember, I'll never forget. And then this is when I had all my cell cams on this particular area coming to my email. So I didn't have to log into the app. They just came straight to my email, these 4 or 5 cameras I had in this couple 100-acre block. And I'm sitting there just casually going through email. I look up and I remember screaming out, "Oh my gosh!" My dad's like, "You know what is going on?" And whoever else was over at our house that night, and he's like, "What's going on?" I'm like, "It's Big Chocolate." And we got a picture of him that night, a couple hours after we came out, and it was in the exact same spot that ray of light was coming down on that ridge. It was the exact same ridge. And I was like, "Good Lord, you know, this is you know, is this divine faith, or is it what is it? What's going to happen here? Does that mean I'm going to kill him up there now?" So, and he looked okay. He didn't, you know, you disappear a week or 10 days like that, and I didn't know how much he had eaten. I didn't know if he'd left the farm, went somewhere else. But he looked okay, and so I hunted him pretty hard. Next week or two, would get an occasional pick, and pretty much he was still in kind of the you know, recovery mode. So I didn't. I hunted him hard, but not as hard as I hunted him in November. I was like, you know,
Gotcha.
I don't know if it's meant to be for this deer.
Any
Maybe
of
I'm
your
not killing.
any of your pictures get any like views of the shot or like the wound that
Yeah,
you gave me
yeah.
from earlier?
It's like, man, you know, that shot should kill him. It should just absolutely kill him. Where I hit him, you know, it just wasn't. It wasn't a bad shot. You know, maybe a
Yeah.
little bit higher than where you would aim, but it's
Huh.
right there. It just looks like it should have gotten. The only thing I thought, you know, in my mind was I just didn't get enough penetration to hit those lungs, because, you know, you don't have to just blow through those lungs. You know, you nick them pretty good, and that deer, 9 times out of 10, he's going to die. I mean, they can live on a single lung hit or something, but it's very tough for them too. So, but they are tough,
Gotcha.
resilient animals, especially these big Midwestern bucks. So
Yeah. I
I
guess
said,
that's
well,
why you
maybe.
call him Big Chocolate instead of Mr. Chocolate, right? That's because he's tough.
Yeah, yeah, he's tough, man. He's tough. And so I'm like, I don't know if I'm gonna kill this deer or not. I said maybe, and that's kind of how I live my life. Maybe it wasn't meant to be. Maybe this deer is gonna blow up to be some giant, non-typical next year after this injury. Maybe I'm not meant to kill him, and that was what I was telling myself to get by. So I still had not killed a deer in in Iowa that year. I shot one or two in Illinois, I think. So I kind of at least blew some steam off over there. So it rolls around to late season, and this is, yeah, I vividly remember it now. It was 2019, and because it was, I think it was the first day of 2020, and I took my mom hunting. He had been, we went down to Georgia for Christmas, and he had daylighted a couple times in this one field, the same field I had seen him like 3 or 4 years prior when I first had the encounter with him, and it was in this cornfield. I said, well, that's where I'm going to hunt him. And this was almost a mile and a half, 2 miles from where I had shot him. But this is
Oh
kind of
wow.
where he
Okay.
was wintering. I say that, but I think that's, it's been a couple of years now, but I think that's about how far he was. It may have been I'm saying it may have been a mile, but no, I think it was close to a mile and a half. So where the crow flies. And so I'm sitting there, and I'm going to go hunting. I hunted him a couple of days, and he wasn't showing up. And I said, I'm going to take my mom out this day. It was either New Year's Eve or New Year's. Yeah, I think it was New Year's Day. It could have been. It was New Year's Day, because I was like, man, 2020. we're going to start it off right. Later we found out it would be one of the craziest years in history. But so I take her out there, and this buck shows up. He walks out, man, gets within 80, 100 yards. And we didn't even film him much. I'm like, first chance I get, this deer stops. I got a muzzle loader in my hand. It's muzzle loader season. I said, I'm killing this son of a gun. And she's with me. She's my good luck charm. We still say that to this day. And he came out there. We got a little bit of footage of him, and boom, I shoot. Just smoke goes everywhere. I was like, I know I hit him.
Yeah.
I can't confirm that on the video, but I know I did. So we went and got everybody. Sure enough, go over there, start tracking him. And, this time he had finally ran out of his good fortune or his good luck. And I killed him, and it was with a gun. Yeah, I would have loved to have gotten him with a bow, but nonetheless, to me, it's always kind of more about the animal than maybe my personal accomplishment on something like that. But he's dead, but looking back, yeah, and we were extremely happy. Like I say, and he was a giant. He was a big deer, but still, when I think about that deer, because he had put me through so much, not on purpose, but the lowest of lows, if you say even kill or your life is average or you're somewhere in here, but the lowest of lows were lower than the high of me finding him that night, because I almost was just like, I was relieved it was over, because it had consumed my life that entire fall, and not necessarily in a good way. It was just everything revolved around that deer. And it was like, once I killed him, I could go on my life. And I was extremely relieved. And usually it's not like that, but with me and deer. And since then, my dad's like, oh man, you need to go hunt this deer. I was like, no, I may go in there and hunt him once or twice, but I am not locking horns with another buck. I'm bouncing around the farm. I'm hunting some of my favorite stands. I'm enjoying the sights, the sounds, the smells of the rut. And I'm sure one day again I'll fall down that rabbit hole of hunting a specific buck. But since then I have not. I am not scared if I'll go in there and a buck's not doing right. He's not showing up. I'm on to the next one. I haven't let just get me engulfed like Big Chocolate did. And he's hanging on my wall. He's a beautiful mount.
What was his official score, if you don't mind me asking?
I didn't never get him officially scored, but I scored him. And usually I always get within an inch or two of the ones that I've had officially scored. But he was 181 inches, and he would have been, he had 21-inch beams, which he looked like he had 25-inch beams, and he didn't. So that's why he looks bigger than 181, but he's got tall tines. His brow tines are a little short, but just a big, clean, 10-pointer with a couple little kickers. But had he had normal beams for a deer that and frame that size, he's easily 190-inch typical. But he's 181, 182, somewhere in there.
That's awesome. Is he the biggest deer you ever killed?
No, he's not the biggest one. I've killed a few bigger than him, but it was.
Wow.
I've hunted none harder. I can promise you that. I've hunted none harder.
That's a cool story, man. Yeah, I stand by the fact that I am not a good enough hunter to ever hold out for any deer or elk or anything in particular. If it
you'll get there. You will get there quicker than you think.
I bet. I'm putting in more and more time. But yeah, at this point, I'm just happy to have meat in the freezer. I've had a little bit of a drought, and like I told you, I just did put down my first archery elk, and so I'm pretty fired up to fill that freezer when I get the meat back. So.
Oh man, that's good eating right there.
Oh yeah. Especially the guys that I was with. I was like, all right, boys, we'll split all this meat up. I want everyone to eat well, and they're like, nope, you take it all. So I've got
really, wow,
yeah. They one of them, him and both of his children killed elk last year. So like we got so much elk, we can't take any right now. So it's a first world problem, I guess, to have too much.
Right, man, it's great. I would I love all types of venison, but as far as just ground, I mean, I would almost, if there's a pack of deer and there's a pack of elk that lay in there, even though that elk is an old, 10, 12-year-old rutted up animal, that ground elk, man, it's tough to beat.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I will say, have you ever had axis deer? I've had some.
I have not, but all I've heard is how it's probably the best wild game on the planet.
Yeah, my wife is very particular. In fact, she I've shot one whitetail. She was not interested in chowing down on that guy. But I shot an axis deer, a doe, and she was like, "This is phenomenal," and she would say, "I'll eat that all day, every day." And I'm excited to see what her opinion is of the elk, but I'm hoping it's in the same regard as the axis deer. Otherwise, I got to figure out how to hunt more axis deer because I
Well,
don't
what
want
is it
to. I
like
don't want to.
like a lighter meat?
No, it's just red meat. It's very much like I mean, I don't know if I can say this because I don't know if it's totally accurate, but my wife says it's so similar to beef that she's like it's fantastic. It's very lean, like all game meat, but
Yeah,
it just
yeah,
doesn't. I don't know. She thinks the other meat has gamey flavor. I don't know. Maybe
right.
it wasn't cleaned well enough. I'm not
Yeah,
sure,
yeah,
but
a little fat in there, something like that.
yeah. So either way, yeah, Jeff, you got to try axis deer. First off, they're beautiful animals and they're fun and they make
Oh
cool
gosh, they're
noises and all that stuff.
gorgeous, man.
But they are really good eating. I will say, don't eat their fat. When we killed that doe, the gentleman I was with took a little bit of fat and just wanted to just kind of render it down on top of it, and it just tasted. It's like we coated that backstrap in wax.
Uh-huh.
Still delicious. Just gave us a real weird, texture
Really?
in your mouth.
Yeah, no, I get that. No,
Yeah.
a lot of people they do say like your wife was talking about the game, yes, and yes, I do believe some deer is not processed properly, cleaned properly, or maybe got some blood exposed or whatever. But I've had a lot of people lately, and I kind of believe it. It's just how much fat is in that meat, especially on venison, and that's kind of what really. And if you ever just smell fat, you can kind of see how that is. But that's what really gives it that gamey taste is when
Yeah.
too much fat gets mixed in with your meat.
I believe it. I believe it. Well, Jeff, man, that was an awesome story. It was fun. I could feel your anxiety as you were telling that story about it, like just all season long, just being pent up and every day worrying something happened to this buck that you've been targeting.
Oh yeah, yeah, what took me down a little dark hole having to retell that story. No, it did though. It did honestly. That was just crazy times.
Yeah, man, I believe it. I believe it. I don't know if I'll ever get there, and I kind of after hearing your story hope I don't, but whatever. We'll see what the
Right.
future
Yeah.
holds. That being said, man, you got any more stories for us? Any other ones you want to tell? If not, well, I'm content. But I tell everybody this: I'm not going to stop you.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. I think that's probably about it. I'm trying to think of any other ones that really come to mind, but that was kind of my big three. I think I had on
Okay.
tap to share. Of course, I could talk deer hunting, deer stories all night, but those are definitely two of the ones that I the most memorable. But they're like you said earlier. You tell them to a non-hunter, they're not. They just want to hear the punchline. But
Yeah.
that as a hunter, those are longer stories that definitely have to be told with all the details to
Yep. The devil is in the details. The fact that your legs quit
their
working
moment.
as you're
Yeah.
chasing a turkey, like some non-hunters may not understand that, but to me that
Right.
was perfect. So thank you,
Yeah.
man. Well, cool.
I
Well,
hope
why
you
don't we
never hope you never get there.
yeah. Well, why don't we tell the people where they can find you? I know you mentioned it a little bit at the beginning, but give them another dose of where they can find everything that you do.
Absolutely, man. Yeah, we're easy to find on social media. At the Lindsay Way, whether it's Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, TikTok. We're on all of those. YouTube. You can watch most all of our hunts on YouTube. Kind of more behind the scenes action. We're on the Outdoor Channel five times a week. Our main time is Tuesday nights, 8 p.m. Central, 7 p.m. 8 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Central. So that's where we're at. TheLindsayWay.com has all of our air times, apparel sponsors, all of that stuff on there. We're surrounded by a bunch of great partners, kind of keep us going, and we just out here trying to have a lot of fun hunting the wild, mainly the whitetail deer. We're going to get in a little bit of the elk and the ducks next couple of weeks, but most fall you can find us chasing that whitetail deer.
Perfect, man. Perfect, Jeff. Well, thank you again, man. I really appreciate it. Like I said, you jumped on the opportunity to tell some stories, and I want to say thank you. So I
Yes,
really do
sir.
appreciate you.
Yes, sir, man. I enjoyed it. Had a lot of fun reminiscing.
Yeah, man. We'll have to get your dad on here, and then I'm sure I actually get a message from I'd say at least 50% of my guests as soon as we hang up the recording, being like, "Oh man, I just thought of a whole bunch more I wanted to tell you." So
Yeah,
maybe we'll have
yeah,
you
yeah.
back
Come
someday.
back. Absolutely, man.
All right, man.
For
Well,
sure.
thank you again.
Yeah, thanks a lot, man. Take care.
Yeah, you as well. All right, guys, that's it. Another couple stories in the books. Again, Jeff, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I really do appreciate you. And your stories, they're pretty classic. I mean, I can just picture you trying to run after that turkey and your legs just not cooperating at all. I've told that story to a lot of folks in my own circles already because it's just too funny to me. So thank you again, sir. I do appreciate you. Make sure you guys go out there and follow them. They're on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, TikTok. You can find them everywhere. I put links to everything in the show notes, so you can find them right there. And they also, of course, have a website. Beyond that, guys, please make sure you give us a follow on Instagram and subscribe to the podcast and share it with at least one person, so we make sure that we're growing and that more people are finding the podcast to tell us their crazy stories. But that's it, guys. Thank you again. I really do appreciate y'all tuning in. I hope you had as much fun this week as I did. Now get out there and make some stories of your own.